Yeah. Oh, Schmoedown rockers. Interesting, but on the dungeon end, a kind of rough week, but I kind of saw it coming with that one. More on that later. We'll start with the first play-in match. One that was going to be my initial first idea, but I realized I don't think, especially given some time yesterday what happened, for me on a personal thing about, I don't think anybody would have liked me having a cat inside right now. So that idea went to crap. Figured I'd just kind of, so as you know, just to give you an insight of the behind the scenes BTS right there. So, yeah. Also, I wanted to do this shirtless, but it's like, nah. In case I do get monetized, if that's even possibility. But anyways, a lot of inspiration for Vinny, all this other stuff. I just figured I'd do that, and I couldn't do a margarita jug. There was no way I was going to get that blender and not have some issues with my mother in case she was doing something for cake mixes or some bull crap. Which your stuff is good when she does it. So, but yeah, I had to support local brewery. Not sponsored, but yeah. Or at least the closest being around the Festus area. There isn't a real actual brewery. Well, actually, technically there is Feng Jian, but neither here nor there with that. But anyways, but if it is, it's by Crown. Cheshix will probably let you know where that's at if they ever bothered to come down from there. But anyways, point is, the matches started with Bibiani versus James White. That was my only other possible match that could have been a close call, but I could understand if most people picked Bibs anyway. Most people were then slaughtered. The less likely of them, given what the play-in matches had shown, was going to be the Adam Collins. That one I felt was going to wind up going, and given he is more like, and between him and Marcel Marquis, which I'll go back and never go back. That would be. I'd go for that. So, but anyways, that's which was something I kind of threw as sort of a joke, and at least Lando took it pretty well. So, but anyways, but other than that, she seems like, the whole thing with those matches, they've been fine these final weeks. Also, teams announcements were interesting. God, I'm still wondering if I kind of hope we do, but I do feel bad for Perry and Fouch and hope that they do have a future. But Zip and Wit, honestly, I'm hoping the Dungeon does pull out the play-in match. I just don't know who they're going to wind up playing. That hasn't been announced until the brackets are, or at least the bracket part hasn't. The teams themselves have been. Which, thank God, he finally mentioned what the teams were, and so far the only vet teams that seem, or at least seasoned teams of this season that have had play are Tom and Paul, Odd Couple, Founding Fathers, and I believe Final Exam. Other than that, the other other five factions are completely new teams, consisting of, with Ken basically making the best move. I don't know if that move was something that maybe R&B would have considered, but of course they didn't put in Deep 13 because, let's face it, after the match with Final Exam, it was pretty clear that they just got lucky when it came to the whole Tom and Paul thing. And the matchup between and I think when D13 had to face Final Exam, that was pretty much it. And given how both players wound up playing in their round ones, I had a feeling that, or at least since those were already pre-taped, they already had an idea of what they were going to do after that. It was pretty clear that, that D13 just got lucky with Tom and Paul, but that they didn't know, and that was more on Kate's making a rookie mistake that pretty much cost the record, and cost them points. That shouldn't have happened ever. Yet somehow, some way, the Pride wound up being the bread and butter, and they decided not to do that. And given what happened with Silver String in round 1, and Goddard and them just basically got burnt out, is what it amounted to. And Preston just had a really bad go at it. And even though I'm happy the Dungeon did, I feel bad for Paul because he's been between that and the loss with Tom and Paul, and they've had a bad year. And it's clear Tom is a stronger player, or at least way better than what Video Drew had been saying in her shows. So, yeah. Or at least maybe it seemed like she was, but it seems he might have actually been studying through this group, and it's paid off a lot more than we thought. Or at least to the point where he was lucky that he did well enough that he didn't have to worry about Franco. I'm trying to remember who he's going to wind up facing next. But I'll figure out. I'll talk. I mean, I should talk round 2 predictions, but I can't remember. I don't have it on hand. I tell you what, I'll bring it out. So yeah, I'm gonna have to take my glasses off for this one. It's gonna be hard for any of us to see this one. But anyways, yeah. So, given what has happened with that, it seems that he will. I guess we'll get to those predictions eventually. But when it comes down to it, I'm not surprised with Bibbs. It was tough on him, and yes, as far as and I give credit to James White. I was honestly hoping he would pull out the win in his play-in, which he did, and the play-ins versus the vets, and so far it seems the vets throughout this had been pretty solid. The only one that was going to be more of a teeter-totter would have been between him and Collins. Was between John Roca and Collins. It seems, and then of course the one that I was most likely could have went either way would have been between Paul and Marcel Marquis. And Marcel Marquis, apparently I didn't think about this till Harloff had said something. And yeah, I understand that Rachel was a comparison. I don't know about that. Though she seems to have come somewhat close in that regard, and the Lady Justice herself she's got an interesting shtick that she sticks to, character shtick that she sticks to, that I like, and she's very good at what and obviously she's pretty dang good, as evidenced in her play-in match. That I'm trying to remember who, but I marked that off. I feel awful that I did. Yeah, I forgot. But anyways, I can't read how I marked it off. But let me see if I have a chance to read it from there. And it says I can't read it. Never mind. I guess at this point it don't matter. But either way. Oh yeah, it was Bonnie. That's right. I guess I had to block that out because it did annoy me how that turd played the hell out. It's like, and she wasn't really needed to be there, but it's not that she did better, but let's face it, it wasn't much of anything, because the moment she got her 2-pointer, of course it was going to happen. Of course Marquis was going to make it out of there. She played really well there. But the real test was Oyama, and she pretty much played pretty well, or at least well enough to where I guess she got out of TKO range, so it wound up being a little more down to the wire, and it was more down to her 5, and she wasn't able to pull it, so Oyama didn't have to answer her for his 5, maybe? I think, I'm trying to remember, but, which, I mean, sucked for Marquis, but at least Marquis, things were working out as well as they could, so, sorry, you'll do better again. I know you will, and even more so now because of, and that's what makes these play matches even more interesting, since of the team's announcement, which we'll get to that part in a minute, because that was the thing Corruption needed to do, and she'll get another chance in that team's tournament. We will, and by the time I put it in the thumbnail, you'll already know what that's all about. But and then of course. And at least, Vinny, I mean, Vinny was a tough one. I'd have liked him to put more of a fight, but by the time around two, it just didn't work out. He was lucky that Ethan missed one of his questions, and even crazier that the question he missed on, Vinny did get, so he can at least he could brag about that if he wanted. But I think he knew he calmed his nerves, and even though he knew he was probably a lamb to the slaughter. By that point, he was like, yeah, well, I'll make it enough fight as long as I don't give him any points, even though Ethan managed to get a seal off of 1 point. He just did well enough that he was able to at least not get completely knocked out. So, and he was able to hit a 2-pointer, so at least put up something. So, it just sucks, Vinny. I mean, it just sucks that this happened to you, man. So, but overall, man, it was a fine match for what it was, I guess. I mean, even though it was a slaughter, and the whole Sin Fanatics thing was funny. I mean, it sucked, but it was also kind of poor you having to hold your own in that one. I didn't, but I think you were also in C2A's thing, so it was kind of that one must have been a little more interesting and put you on your toes for that interview, I guess. But anyways, I still think you should be. I think the whole thing between Video Drew at least wanted to have partnered with you instead of Juan, though Juan seemed like she would have been more of a new Tom, but he did not it didn't pan out as well, and he missed way more than Tom, I think, did in his match with his match with Paul against Deep 13. So, and Video Drew's proven she can be good. It's just now she's up against people who were top tier contenders, and one that's a 2-time champ. She could say she lost at least to top tier competitors, So it's nothing to scoff at, Even though technically Riley has not been a top tier competitor for years, since the start of the Schmoedown in general, but whatever. Overall, I mean. And then we get the match that essentially may as well be considered it, even though I think as a much tighter match, it might as well have been more Perry versus Kalinowski. Now I think I think the whole thing that happened with Snyder may as well have been him shooting himself in the foot, because that was his one and only chance, it seems. Because he may never get a chance to get a singles belt. And now the same may be said for another fellow sort of cowboy hat wearer, I guess. I say sort of on my end, more so than his. John Roca. It seems ever since you started playing virtual, you just can't win, can you? Or at least you can't just pull enough of a win. You can play well, but you just can't get the W, regardless. And that's what seems to be the issue. I feel as though you could come back next year once because it's clear you thrive better in a studio or crowds or live crowd setting. And that's more your bread and butter than this virtual stuff. But you can still play alongside the best of them regardless. The fact that you're even getting that Queen Corruption is saying props, but I think it's also more just her adding insult to injury, which I think was what the intention was, but I'm not even sure on that myself. But I think it was even Collins himself was surprised. You could tell, and he was surprised, but at this point, no matter who would have won anyway, they more likely would have beat Lon. But we'll see how that would have went. But and Collins didn't even have to ask a question, so that's here nor there, I guess, with Lon thing. But I do think he'll get past Lon. But yeah, those matches were fine. Vinny's was less expected. Collins could have gone either way, but the way the match wound up going, it was more clear that Collins came to play, and he had to play perfect just to beat Roca anyway. And even if Roca did manage to hit the 2 on his last question for Westerns, he'd have still needed to hit his 3 or his 5, and he never could. So, it wouldn't have mattered. wouldn't have mattered in that regard, but it would have mattered more if he had managed to get at least a point, or at least one or two other points in round one. He would have had a shot. And it had more of a shot to at least get out of TKO range and force Collins to answer questions, but that's what happened with that. And sorry to Rocco, but it just puts more pressure on Merle to win that singles title belt. But I'm predicting, my match predictions, or at least who I would prefer to win, is essentially that need the wins the most. Well, it's tough to say with the main event, but in terms of the undercard, it's Janine. Janine needs this win way more than Warfather ever does. I like Warfather. Wouldn't hate him winning, but it would bum the crap out of me for Janine to just have such a terrible year and not at least have one win coming out of this year, since she couldn't do tournaments. And so this is the best thing they could do for her. And then I think the best prediction with that is, it's crazy with that. But as far as with Marquis and now with Collins, especially after this match with Roca, that team now has momentum going forward into the team's tournament, which Corruption has chosen because, Corruption has already won the team Corruption itself of Chance Ellison and Mike Kalinowski. At least in terms of IG and teams, they are still elite in that regard. It seems Chance is more likely now on his way to being able to be considered elite in singles, depending on who he runs against, which Chance is going up against Liz Shannon Miller, more than likely a Chance. If Oyama was able to beat her, but was able to barely beat her, I think Chance will have a chance. But, good luck to Miller. It could go either way with that one. Mark and Meyer... basically Andreyko and Meyer is going to be is definitely another interesting one. I'm going to get Barbarian and Bibiani. I understand most people picking Bibs, but hopefully Barbarian can pull it off. But given they may have accidentally, through the Roca match, spoiled the fact the round 2 match had already been taped before that. 2 matches have already been taped before that, and it's a possibility that Barbarian did not get the W against Bibbs, unfortunately, if that is the case. I'm hoping I'm wrong, but that's what I think has happened. I could be wrong. I'm hoping to be wrong, and, Barbarian did. Or it was just a mistake on their end in that match that he completely forgot Barbarian was still in the tournament. I don't know. It could be either one of those things. I'm hoping it's more the latter than the former, so, for Craig's sake. And Irwin and Zipper, yes. He pulled a win luckily pulled a win against Preston, but that's what pisses me off the most. Zipper's is gonna face Irwin, another champion level buzzsaw. He could put up a fight, but it could wind up just like what happened in the round 2 in Intergeekdom with Kalinowski. The difference, but the real question is it's more the fact that he just Zipper just ain't gonna have that luck because he had to put him against there. But if that upset happens, I still feel bad for Birthday Buddy, but gosh darn it, I'm gonna be proud of him. I'm gonna be proud of Zipper for staying in there, despite having to face either Jader or Tom, which that one's gonna be one hell of a match in and of itself. Jesus. And then there's Perry and Riley, and it seems likely at this point Perry may more likely win than Riley, even though Riley could still be the favorite one, but given the way things are tracking, and Perry having just beat Kalinowski, who's a little bit more of a top-tier player, even though he's going to have to crawl his way back up in the standings for next season just to be able to get back into singles contention. And, of course, we also have the rematch that will hopefully more than likely be better than what we got out of a championship match that was pretty much the shittiest live main event that will ever be talked about. Unfortunately, which it shouldn't have been. Even though Oyama unfortunately has 2 championship matches where he's considered that, so it winds up making his own reign a fluke anyway. Ugh. which sucks. And I think he wants to make up for that and redeem himself. And the best way to do that is to face someone who both players had a very bad match, and this time I think they want to give it their all. And I think as long as they do that in this 3-rounder match, it'll still be, despite being virtual, it'll still be miles better than a live event match. And I'm hoping for, I personally would rather have a Yama pull out the win, because still, once dungeon, always dungeon the way I see it. Swag Squad drip drip anyway. But, yeah. And, I want to give it to Tom, but I could see Jader possibly pulling it out. But that's a either way. Chance Miller's an either way. Bibbs Bibiani's an either way. Mark's an either way. Clearly, most of these matches, with the exception of maybe Ura and Eric, of the top, except the top column one, so between Collins Lawn and Eric Irwin, those ones I understand most people picking at this point Collins and Irwin. But either the other bottom 3 on each side is either way. But other than that, I mean, the team's announcements were great. Zip and Wit, I guess because he realized the Butcher Boys and, well, Cuckoo's Mess were, nothing really worked with them. And it was pointless to even bother to bring them in because he wanted to win, and he figured he'd put 2 top-tier players. And it seems Burning Druids, or at least Ken, while he did the same thing by having to pick the 2 best players that individually that he could come up with and put them together, which was Parama, that could potentially also balance each other out. And that's Jader, Parama, and of course Brian Hanna. I have my issues with him, but it seems he's slightly put in such good graces by Sabrina. Anyway, so unless somehow they pull a Bonnie and Clyde storyline next season between the 2 of them, which could be a possibility. Wouldn't put it past him. But anyways, I think that's what's cooking in Harleff's brain ever since he found out about them being together. Especially after that one match. She unfortunately didn't make, but at least she played, and she can at least bounce off of that. It was just a rookie year, rookie season, whatever. So, and yes, those are my predictions of those are my predictions in round 2 of who will make it to round 3 before they make it to semifinals. And then there's, I mean, the teams are crazy. Oh, the fucking teams, man. Oh, man, it's like already McKee and like Collins is looking like it'll be a tear. That sucks. It all just depends on how the brackets pull off. And we'll get to see those 2 rookies team together and see how they play out. Maybe they might go even further than most of the other teams, but I'm expecting, and I understand, given how Atchity and Alonso played in this singles tournament, after following up the Deep 13 loss, it seems like Ken was probably smart in having to pick a better team with 2 of the better players that are in the Druids and the best representation that they'll ever get at this point. Since all the other players, I think, have already played that have been in the Druids at this current point, have already done their time, and it seems Jader is doing well, and Jader's been doing well. I don't know if he'll beat Tom or not, but that'll definitely help move forward between him and Hannah, and I think the 2 of them might be able to work together, but that all depends on how much in character Hannah's going to be. And if Hannah's character and ego gets too far in the way, it could ruin their chances. And I don't think they should play that out. He may want Ken there, but I feel like Jader will want Ken there, so Jader's probably going to have to tell Hannah to shove it, basically, whether he'll accept it or not. He's going to have to accept him because Jader needs him. And it's worked out for him, at least, with singles tournament. Suck it, Hannah. So, yeah. And then, since Shazam isn't there, the Perry and the play-in match makes me mad, though, because I want to see the Witching Power, which is going to be Perry Nemiroff and... Perry Nemiroff and... what is his name? and Haley Fouch. Fouch never got a chance to do anything this season, but they were going to save her for teams, I guess. But he decided to save her for teams and whatnot. And so far, Bibbs and them have at least passed round one. They've lived up to their expectations, and they're currently going to be, I guess, whenever that match is going to happen, which I'm guessing might be next month. And it's a possibility that, and it wouldn't surprise me if the undercard of that is going to be the Wildberry Civil War between Makuga and them, which is fine as an undercard anyway. They needed to finally just get that storyline out of the way. And that wouldn't be a bad one because that makes it a whole corruption thing. Since, since corruption has the belts. But we'll see how that plays out. That's my guess for what will be the next pay-per-view, by the way. I'm gonna say it just bums me as a dungeon head, and I don't know what positive reinforcement I could do for my dungeon heads or make them feel welcome, whether or not that matters or not, given where we're at. And since the play-in match, it's like, well, given Perry's trajectory after beating Kalinowski, yeah, this ain't. And if she beats Riley in round 2, yeah, this ain't gonna go over well for me as a dungeon head. If we lose this, the dungeon is officially probably going to wind up dead last. If given Irwin and Guy is still a thing, I guess they're going to call themselves Team TKO or something. They could, but I don't, because of their history of, even though he's been knocked out himself in singles, Guy, twice by the same dude. So, yeah. But anyways, even though he's say he has to Riley and them, and Riley has not been able to pick up the pace aside from his run in teams. So, which is why it would be crazy if somehow Guy and Riley somehow managed to work together in teams and become an even better team, all of us, a great team, which would be fucking weird, by the way. Which is why I'm fine with what we're getting with the Irwin Guy thing, which is, because Guy as a teams player is good. It will step up, especially if he has an already individually good player himself that can pick up the slack. Though it's given how his track record with his misses, he has to bet on him going perfect if he can't fucking bring it, And Guy just brings the character and has him do the answer, and I'm hoping it works between the two of them. So, or they could do an Asian themed thing since I know they're both Asian. But anyways, we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I'm hoping for God. I'm hoping Nudge does pull the win because we need the points more. We need it's not, and I'm hoping we can at least go far. But it all depends on who we face after the play-in and how the bracket goes with that. But and then there's Odd Couple's still in it, and then there's the other teams besides. And the Zip and Wit thing wasn't a terrible idea. Plus, they're more inner geekdom-ish centric, but they can have history in singles and are as decent players, and maybe they can balance. Maybe as a team. Which they didn't do terrible in teams, but they've never really had something going, and they have a chance, and it seems Fouch and Perry are the same thing, so that just makes this a lot tougher. But it all depends on how this goes with the brackets. And if it winds up being Jade or Parama, then maybe, just maybe, Zip and Wit actually can still at least go past round 1. But if it's a top tier team like that, a couple of Founding Fathers, I'm gonna be pissed because you've literally just sent them to the wolves. You once again sent my dungeon to the wolves, or even Ethan Guy. God damn it! Why are you sending my dungeon to the wolf of Ethan again? And if anything, if depending on how that round 2 match between Irwin and Zipper go, Zipper will have something to go off of his fuel regardless, if he needs to, with Zip and Wit if they have to face those two. Though it's going to be tougher for them, I think, given Guy's personality bullshit. So, plus Action Army will probably back that team more than anything at this point. And it's the only part of Action Army that's ever going to go through, and yeah, that's what's going to suck. And I can understand if Founding Fathers and Odd Couple are in the finals, but it all depends on if those two have to face each other earlier on. Then that may not ever happen, but that's something that needs to happen too, is having them eventually face each other, because who knows if we'll ever see them face each other again. Then there's... God, I'm trying to remember the other teams. I mean, besides Marquee and them was good. I did say Zip and Wit. I said something about the Witching Power. I've said something, which is for Quirky Mercs. I know that. And I said Zip and Wit. I said that. Ethan Guy. And, of course, Tom and Paul is going to be something as well. I'd say, despite understandably most people's thought on Zip and Wit, but they're the only best players that are available that can be a team and be sufficient that we have right now, since the other two teams we've had have not. And even trying to do the combination of Video Drew and Vinny, especially after their round ones, less likely. You want players that know that are damn good, despite it's more that Witch just has had bad luck in his 2 Star Wars matches he's had this year, and the only luck he seems to have shown was being a manager, but which means he could reel in and help Zipper out as well. Hell, I think he helped. No, he didn't help Zipper, which would have been more awkward if he did, given was with Preston. Yeah. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. But regardless, I'm hoping that these. But these teams are pretty. All the teams are looking pretty good. And depending on what the bracket is, then we'll be able to predict from there. But these teams are mostly, I'd say, all solid, as far as solid to damn great, for the most part. So, but it all depends how things go with that. So, what do you guys think of these finals week? Your predictions going into tonight's match, which is when I'm taping this before that, so I'm fresh and I don't have to worry about that fucking up my head and me spoiling shit with that pay-per-view before it does go public. So that's why. And comment below, let me know. As always, guys, keep it random, keep it real, keep it rocking. If you smell what the movie trivia Schmoedown rocks, so entertainment, blah 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 blah, is cooking. Ooh, yeah. Dig it.